Hello everybody, welcome back to Overlanding Forward. Today we're going to talk about all of the questions that I've amassed on the different platforms that I'm on, Instagram, YouTube, all the DMs, emails that I've had in the 2 years I've been running the channel, and almost the 2 years I've had this. I get the questions all the time. Sometimes I don't post them publicly, but what I've done is I've taken them all, compiled them all down, and I'm going to go through all of the questions in different categories about this thing, about the build, the concept behind the build, and hopefully give you an insight into why this thing has turned out the way it is. So I'm going to keep referring to my notes. It's quite warm here in Portugal. So let's go. So first of all, this is a 2010 Range Rover Autobiography Black. It is a 4.4 diesel. It's a V8. It's got the twin turbos on it, although they're sequential turbos. They're not separate turbos as some of the people might think. We're not going to get into that. So I put close to 20,000 miles on it since I've had it in 2 years. A vast majority of that, 80%, has been done in Europe. How much of that has been off-road? In the different trips to both Spain and Portugal and the Pyrenees primarily, where I've done most of it, I would say I've probably done about 4,000 or 5,000 miles off tarmac. And you can describe whatever you could look at this and say, well, it's not really off-road because you're not rock crawling or anything, but it's gravel, sand, all that sort of type of travel, non-tarmac off-road. So that's what the vehicle is. That's what I put on it. I'm not going to go into details. I've actually documented how much I've spent on it at this period of time, not including sort of things like turbo rebuilds and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so let's get into it. The question that comes up a lot is why an L322 and not a Discovery? So meaning a D3 or a D4. There's a misconception that people think D3s and D4s are very, very similar to this. They're not. There's a reason why Range Rovers are at the high end and D3s, D4s, Discoveries are at the lower end. It's just the way they're positioned. They are not the same technology in them. The terrain response is different. There's lots of things that are different on the platform itself. So for me, I like to look at things being relatively unique. So it was a challenge for me to go from a Defender 90 to this, but I wanted to prove you could do it with an L322. There are plenty of D3, D4 Overland builds. There's very, very few L322 Overland builds. There's a few. I think I've inspired a couple as well. But I like to think that mine is one of the best Overland builds out there for an L322. So for me, it was all around, could I actually take the challenge of turning this into an Overland vehicle? And that's what you see here. So it's not that I don't like Discoveries. I actually quite like the D4s. But to me, these are just better equipped. They're higher end, much more comfortable. The terrain response and the EAS is different, despite what people might think. They are different. They're programmed different. And if you don't believe me, go talk to Max at Land Rover Passion. His Easy Lift kit, he will tell you all the nuances of having to program the differences between an L322, an L320, and a Discovery 3 and Discovery 4. They are different technologically. So let's just get that out there. So no, I didn't consider a Discovery. I've had one of these before when I was living in the States, one of the earlier ones with BMW engines. I love it. This one comes up a lot, most to do with the trolls. Would you ever consider a Toyota? No, never. Wouldn't be seen dead in one. I think they're just soulless tin boxes. And no, I wouldn't. Now, having said that, I do enjoy watching channels, specifically things like Ronnie Dial. But would I consider one? No, sorry, wouldn't. This is in the blood. Nothing I can do about it. What's worked well and what would you change? So what's worked well is I'm massively impressed by the capabilities of the vehicle off-road. And what I mean by that is I have put it through its paces. Now again, this is not built to do rock crawling. If you want to do rock crawling, go buy a 90 or a 110, stick on a 2-inch lift, put lockers on it, go for it. That's not what I want to do. So this also provides me the ability with comfort over distances. So I drove down this trip right the way through France, from the top of Spain all the way into Portugal. Just did it effortlessly. If I was in a 90 or a 110, yeah, you could do it, but you'd be pretty knackered after doing it. So for me, this combines the luxury and quality and comfort of a Range Rover with an Overland Build. So that's really what's worked out really well. One thing about the Autobiography Black, this has a rear locker as standard. And to me, that was vital when I bought this, which is why I went for an Autobiography Black, is that I knew every single one of them had a rear locker. And very, very small percentage of them come with rear lockers. So that is another reason why I have it. So I have seen the rear locker kick in many, many times. So for me, that is a big part of this platform, is that I have center lock and a rear locker, where a lot of the D3s, D4s don't generally have them. And that just helps. So I love the platform, and that's what's worked. Would I change anything? No, no, I'm really happy. The only thing, and I'll talk about this, that I would change would be the front calipers, but we'll get into that in a minute. How's the rear setup? Love it. It's gone through many iterations, from the first one where I thought I could put in a dog guard. Wasn't enough room because of the way the dog guard, the full gauge and cage was, so that came out. I've reworked putting in my fridge and the kitchen over a period of time. That's gone through some subtle changes as well. I am quite hemmed in with space, but what I've tried to do is to build that rear tailgate load space with the ability to be able to continue to add things to it. So for instance, I've got two 100 amp lithium batteries stacked on top of each other, wedged into the corner there where all the electronics is. Now I still have all the panels and everything, all the factory covers, all that sort of stuff still in place. And then I have my dual ARB compressor bolted to the back of the kitchen. There's just enough space to put it in there. So it's things like that where you have to get creative around thinking forward of where things are going to go. And I've made mistakes, I've had to change things, I've had to move things around, but overall I'm really happy with the way it's worked out. There are a few things that I do need to change when I get back off this trip, and that is I'm going to ditch my 1000-watt inverter. I hardly ever use it unless I'm plugged in with my Starlink, and that's not always possible because you've got trees and you need a clear view of the sky. And I've changed a lot of my USBs from A's to C's so I can power up things like an iPad. All of that is now in the back. So the only thing I really need my inverter for is my Starlink. And now there are ways, as those things have sort of become commonplace, people have cut them up and figured out a way to be able to turn them into 12-volt power. So there's a couple of things you need to do: step up transformer for 12 volt to 40 volt to be able to get the modem to power the motor in the Starlink. Won't get into all that, that's coming. So I will be getting rid of my 1000-watt inverter, convert my Starlink to 12 volt, run it off my Red Vision system, and then I'm going to rework the panel at the back to give me a little bit more space. So I'm pretty happy where it is, but this is an ongoing process as things sort of, as I mentioned this before, evolve, stuff changes, stuff gets moved out. So that will be going, so that's what I'm pretty happy with. Not a lot that I would change, it's just subtle changes to be able to build all this into what I need. How self-sufficient are you on the road? With all of the power that I've got now and having my Red Vision system, the Manager 30, charging the battery from the start battery, although it's still not pumping in the full amount of amps that I want it to. I think I need to put an ignition trigger in. I can pretty much go for a week with the fridge going, with the hot water heater on, the water pump. I could probably go for a week without having to top up power before I started to drain those lithium batteries down to probably about 30% of their charge. Realistically, here in Spain and Portugal, you can find places to wild camp. Could you stay out for a week? Be tough to do. So realistically, you can find a campsite or you can find an air or something like that, and you can plug in and charge everything up. I didn't bring my solar blanket this time. there is an option for me, because I've got solar power connected to my BMS, that I could plug in a solar blanket, shove it on the roof. I could keep on charging as well. So realistically, a week, if I pushed it, 10 days without any power, having to charge everything up. But I think I'm probably going to be into situations there where I'm down to like 10% of power. And of course, you know, with a solar blanket, you need the sun. What sort of mileage do you get? So I don't generally check mileage, you know, miles per gallon and things like that in the UK. When I do like Baltic trips or into Spain and Portugal, I switch it over to kilometers on the dash. I'm generally averaging on a run about 12 litres per 100 kilometers. And I think that's roughly 32 mpg, something like that. I have noticed since all of the crap has come off the roof, meaning the rooftop tent, my miles per gallon has improved. So my fuel economy has improved without having that big thing on the top dragging everything down. It's a big vehicle. It's not very slippery. It's not very aerodynamic. So I think, you know, with having all that stuff on the roof, you do end up impacting your miles per gallon. But generally, I'm around about 30 to 32 miles per gallon on average, both city and then also, you know, if you go on the motorway. I will say I cruise around in this thing at about 70 miles an hour. I very rarely go over 70. Now, every now and again, I will find a stretch of road and I will throttle it more to get the second turbo spun up and clear all the crap and everything that might be sitting in there. But that's generally what I do. I baby this thing. I don't race it around. It's got phenomenal power and pulling power in it with a low down torque because of the remap. But I generally don't go over 70 miles an hour unless I really have to, even here in Europe where you can. I'm normally cruising around about 108, 110 kilometers an hour. It's enough for this vehicle. It toodles along perfectly and it will tick over at that speed in eighth, doing about 1400 RPM. And so it's being very, very careful on the mechanics of the vehicle, being able to tootle along doing that. So yeah, that's the mileage I get. How's it running after the turbos have been replaced? Good. I have noticed it seems to be running a lot better. Now that could be the fact that I didn't drive it for 5 to 6 months, but I've done one substantial trip through the Baltics and I've done this trip as well. It's running fine. You can definitely feel there's a lot more power put back into the engine. So yeah, I'm really happy with the way all of that work was done. The engine seems fine, not burning any more additional oil, and any of the coolant leaks, and there were some. I think the radiator was on its way out. All of that has been addressed, so I'm pretty happy with it. Right, so let's cover this again. It's been done to death, but we'll do it again. Why don't you have 18-inch wheels and tires? So it's a simple reason. I don't have 18-inch wheels and tires because no rim will fit over the 6-pot calipers on the front of this thing. Now, people have gone and said, yep, I've got an L322 and I've got Brembos and I've got 18-inch wheels. Yes, you do. But you have the older style 4-pot Brembos that were on the vehicle between 6 and 9. This is 10 to 12. There's 6-pot Brembos on these things and they're absolutely massive. Don't believe me? Go ask Sam from Sam's Motor and Machine. He's got pairs of the damn things holding up when he did his rebuild and caliper paint job. There are no rims that fit over 6-pot caliper Brembo brakes. They just don't exist. I've researched this. So I've gone to Barry at Compomotive and asked him about the P, whatever the number is. Answer is nope, don't fit. We thought that a company called No Road Club had one of their Tough Trek, I think it's Tough Trek or True Trek wheels. There was a client of theirs that fitted them on this. Then they came back and told me they don't work. Now, I don't know what happened because there's a picture of it with the same caliper as mine, wasn't painted, with a wheel on it. What they believe that they did was they ground the wheels down or ground the calipers down or stuck spacers on them and bodged it. So basically the comment to me was they don't fit and they would not sell them to me or even get a spare one they had that was bent or whatever to test it because they said they just don't fit. So the answer is that is why I don't have 18-inch rims on this vehicle. Now, if anybody is watching this and can prove to me 1000% that there is a rim that fits over the front of those calipers, let me know. But today, doesn't exist. They simply don't exist. I'm sorry, they just don't. Your exhaust system delete. So at the back, I have, it was one of the very first mods I did. I took off the rear exhaust box. 2 reasons. It's extremely restrictive on engine performance. And number 2, it weighs a hell of a lot. It's about 35 kilos in weight. Those things are monsters. Where did I get it from? There's a guy on eBay. I will put the link in the description, or his name. I think his name's Ian. He's in Preston. He custom fabricates them. They do have silencer boxes on there. You can get them with silencers or without. So I went with the silencers because I think it just becomes obnoxious if you drive around this thing with no back box trying to deaden some of the sound. And if you're on the road for a period of time, it's just going to drive you insane. It does have a really nice burble to it. And when you put your foot down, you can hear the V8. For me, that's good enough. But the most important thing for me was weight savings out the back of that. Now, when I had it done, which is probably 18 months ago, I took it to an exhaust shop in Farnham. It took 2 hours for them to do it. They took the other one down. It took 2 of them to get the damn thing down. They chopped it in half, more for shits and giggles, just to see what was inside it. Well, they wanted to know why it was so heavy. And the amount of wadding and everything to dampen the sound inside of that box, and the pipe work that weaved its way around, you can see how restrictive they are. But this was, you know, this was a luxury vehicle. This one actually came from the Virgin Atlantic upper class fleet system. And so what they did, you know, clearly you've got important people sitting in the back. And the last thing you need in a vehicle like this is all of this noise emanating up from the bottom of the vehicle into the cab. So this thing has actually got double glazing in the back windows. And I believe the reason why that back box is so big with the amount of padding and wadding and pipework is to dampen down the exhaust sound inside of the cabin. Anyway, that's where it came from. I do love it. I do love the burble. If you go look at my Andorra trip, when I went up the smuggler's route, I stuck a GoPro out the back. You can hear it burble all the way up. So it sounds really good. Really happy with it. What's your favorite mod and your least favorite mod? So let's go through the least favorite, or what's come out. So very few things have come off this build. Now, I've mentioned that the 1000 watt inverter is going to come off. That will be number 1. Number 2 is the CB radio. I actually mounted it on the center console and then ran everything in. I've taken it out. I just don't use it. I'm going to go to a handheld because I travel a lot on my own. The only time I've really needed it is when I've been to Germany with the German Land Rover Club, and then when we did the Velta last year. I don't need it. So that's come out. Bin that. There was only a cheap Midland one that I could plug in quite quickly. So I've taken all that out. That's gone. So I wouldn't say it was my least favorite. It was just something that's just not necessary. So that's come off. What's my favorite mod? So there's a couple of things. I've mentioned this before, is the side vents that I painted. Now, I'm not going to take credit for doing it because I saw a picture on Pinterest, don't know how long ago, and just happened to sort of like, hey, they look like the L322 vents that have been painted. I get the most comments on this vehicle from those vents. I just do. People walk by and look at it and point, or they'll stop me and ask me, you know, where do you get them done? It's a small, subtle change. It's not for everybody's liking, but yeah, I think that's one of my favorites. The other thing that I think is probably my favorite, if I have to pick something else as well, is the Easy Lift. Because I now have at the touch of the button, I can raise and lower this thing as I want. So generally it will sit at, I think I've got it at 50 millimeters all the time. But if I need to drop this thing right down, I can put it right on its bump stops to get it into a garage. And even with all the shit on the top, I can still get it into, you know, multi-story car parks and things like that if I have to. I generally don't try and do it, but yeah, the Easy Lift kit is great. And when I had the Rooftop 10, it had a self-leveling function. And the great thing was you can come on sort of like this, which is not 100% level. And instead of carrying those blocks like van lifers do, all I would do was hit a button and it would just jiggle itself and get itself level. So it'll give you a really good flat platform to sleep on when you had the Rooftop 10. So yeah, that would be my second one, which would be the Easy Lift kit. Third, I think it would have to be Red Vision. It's just a brilliant system that makes wiring everything up so much easier. You don't have to worry about any fuses or switches. It just runs all of the cables directly to a box, and it does all the fusing and the switching for you. And again, it's run off an app. It's not for everybody. You've got the controllers as well. But I do love the Red Vision. I had it on the Defender. I have it on this. I think it's brilliant. How many times have you used your shower and hot water system? On this trip, probably about a dozen times. I fire the heater up in the morning. It's all connected to my Red Vision system. So when I wake up, I hit the button, turn on the heater, and then it will start, the water heater will start heating up 6 liters of water. If I need to have a shower, I can just plug it all in, run the pumps, and I have hot water within about 45 minutes. It also depends on the ambient temperature inside the water tank as well. Now, clearly in somewhere like Portugal, overnight it doesn't get, it's not down to 4 degrees or something like that. So it's normally about, mid-teens. So the ambient temperature of the water is a lot higher, which means it heats it up a lot quicker. I can get a 28-degree shower quite comfortably, quite quickly in about 20 minutes. But yeah, I really love the simplicity of it. I didn't bring my shower curtain this time. And all I've got is a cable, or the shower head that plugs into a bracket that I put onto my roof rack, and then I could just run it out the side. And I've got a shower mat that I just stand there. And if I'm out in the middle of nowhere, no one's looking, I just get butt naked and have a shower. No one cares, no one can see me. At least I don't think they can. So yeah, I really do like the shower and the fact that I've got hot water on demand. It has taken up additional space to be able to build all of that componentry into the vehicle, but now the back seats are out, doesn't matter, got plenty of space. A lot of people have been mentioning about my tarps. So one guy said, these tarps you've got seem like a bit of a faff to set up, get a 270 awning. Well, first of all, they're not. This is the Moonshade awning. I've got 2 walls for it now. I've got the small wall and the large wall. I can get this thing plugged in, set up. I timed it just under 3 minutes, where I can get the awning up, feet up, underneath it. I've got shelter. Why? So the other one is I've got the Nature Hike one, which is a big, long awning. If I was going to camp out for a couple of days, and it sits on separate poles as well, you don't need to attach it to the vehicle, I could have it right out the back here. It does take a little bit longer to set up. It's probably about 10 minutes to set it up. But I've got used to how to go set it up now, and I can get it put up again in 10 minutes. So I didn't bring it on this one, I just have this one, purely because it packs up about the same size in the back. They're not a faff to set up. It's more to do with personal preference of having cover out the back where most of the stuff in this vehicle is. The kitchen, sink, all that stuff is out the back. So why not get a 270 awning? 2 reasons. I've spent probably the last year reducing as much weight high up on this vehicle as I can and getting it off, which is why the back seats are out and I've got more space to put camping gear. I've removed one of my pelly boxes. I just have one now because all of that is now inside the vehicle, low down where weight should be. So all of my camping gear, stuff like that, Starlink, has all been built into the back of this. Why? So number 1 is weight. Number 2 is from that end of the roof rack to this end of the roof rack is only 2 meters. There is only one 270 awning, which is an alu cab. I think it's the Shadow Awn that has a 2 meter footprint. Why is that important? Well, first of all, you've got at the back, the tailgate opens up. And if that awning is longer than 2 meters, it will begin to bump up against the tailgate when it swings up, which means you've got to move it forward. So if it's on a footprint of, I don't know, 2.5, 2.6 meters, which some of them are. Now, the other thing is, when they do jut out, to me, and those of you that follow the channel and see what I put out, I suffer from OCD, right? It just looks wrong to me when you've suddenly got this awning jutting out 1/2 meter out the front. It just doesn't look right. And so for me, the answer no, unless I can get a footprint of 2 meters and a decent quality one that doesn't weigh 35, 40 kilos, that some of them do, then their 270 awning is not an option at this point in time. So just before I left, I got an email notification from Tough Trek, which I think are the only places you can get the 2-meter alu-cab shadow warning, that they were back in stock. I seriously considered buying one, but then decided, you know what, not this trip. So that's why I don't have a 270 awning. Would I like one? Yes, I think that would be great, because they're about, you know, a minute to unzip it, flip it all the way around. I also am not 100% sure, because of the way the L322 tailgate goes up, whether it will actually knock against one of the posts that comes around the swing out arms. You probably are okay. You might need to put something under there to protect the window or the glass. It could be an option in the future. I don't know. We'll see. What's left to do? So this one comes up quite a lot. People ask me questions around, are you finished yet? Well, I think with these vehicles, you're never really finished. You always find something to tinker with. When I bought this and started to sort of convert this into an overland build, my general idea was this is probably going to be a 5-year vehicle. And so everything that was going to go in it should last 5 years. That was the concept behind this. If I'm going to put stuff in, now it's not the most expensive stuff, but it's there again, it's not the most, you know, it's not the cheapest. This is not a skimp build. I always said that it had to last 5 years. So whatever I put in it had to be of really good quality, come recommended, been tried and tested. So a lot of the things that have gone in here was to last 5 years. Now I had the Defender for 5 years, and I generally keep cars for 5 years. So I'm not even 2 years into this, and most of the things that have gone in here I'm happy with. As I mentioned before, very few things have come out. Yeah, necessity would dictate that I don't need a CB radio, and I also don't need my 1000-watt inverter. So that'll go on eBay, they'll get flogged. It's okay. It's not because the 1000-watt inverter is crap. It's just I don't need it, so there's no point in having it on the vehicle. But this was always going to be a long-term build and gradually work my way through the things that, you know, I needed to do on it. Sort out the interior, sort out fridge, all those sorts of things to be able to give me a vehicle that will allow me to do what I want to do. So is it finished? And what's left to do? So what's left to do is the winch. I need to bite the bullet and buy one at some point in time. It's a Warn Xeon Platinum 10S, which will allow me to take the control box off the front to give it as much of a low profile as possible and relocate it somewhere in the engine bay. I've already got the winch tray from Land Rover Passion. I just need to pull the trigger on the winch and get that done. The only other thing that I probably need to do or want to do is get a front guard on the front. And that will give me some sort of underbody protection on the front of the vehicle. Not back into the gearbox, because I don't think it needs it. It's really around the engine and the front part of the vehicle in case you rub anything or crack, you know, hit something. That's what I need to do, but that's a custom build. And that's going to require a fabricator to have a look at that and build me something unique for what I need for my application. So am I done? The seats are out now, and that was sort of like a leap of faith after the first one came out. Then I just said, you know what, there's no point in carrying seats around in this thing, lug the whole lot out. So all of that's gone now, and it's allowed me to have more space up against the front seats. So I'm happy with all of that. That's all done. I don't think there's going to be any changes to the back of this at all now. Everything works fine. I've got luggage space in here. I've got space for all the other stuff that I carry. I've reduced weight off the roof. I got rid of a pelly box. So I cannot think of anything else that I need to do. There's no electrics that need to be done with this, and I'm pretty happy with the way that the build has gone so far. So I can tell you sort of 3 things that I love. 1, the amber lights. Now, they're spotlights. They're also floods. Why do I like them? Because I'd use them here in Europe a lot. I have them hooked into my DRLs. So I can go, I've gone into the car configuration file with my gap tool, and you can turn on your DRLs so you don't have to turn your light. First click on the lights, turns on DRLs. You can actually go into the car configuration file and just turn them on. So as soon as the car fires up, the little angel lights show up. My lights are wired into that. So I can run my spotlights, or my flood spotlights, directly off the DRL without turning on my full beam. Now they do come on with a full beam, because if anybody went and tested them legally, that's the way they should be wired up, and they are. but they're tied into that circuit for the DRLs. And I deliberately did it because on Europe, I can drive on the roads with them on. And because you've got this intensity, you can change the stages of how bright they are. I can drive around with amber DRLs on the front on the outer ring. So I really love that feature. And when it starts to get dusk, and it does get sort of quite misty and cloudy, especially on the Portuguese coast, they do help an awful lot if you're driving down the coast by having them on. So I do love the spotlights. And I also like the look of them as well. I think they make the vehicle look pretty cool from the front. Added in the fog light Laminex covering I've got, which I've noticed a few people have been doing those as well, just makes it purposeful. And I think part of that is when we build these vehicles, you want to make them look good. You really do. I'm sorry, there's no point driving around in a shit box that doesn't look good. And I know some people do it, and that's their look. But if you're going to do it properly, make it look good. So anyway, that's one of the things that I like. Dude, this one comes up a lot. Your spare tire. I don't know how many times I've had to answer questions about my spare tire. So today, it's up there. Previous to this year, it was in the back. Now, this is a L322 Space Saver Emergency 20-inch wheel and tire combination. Two reasons. One, if I went with these, they wouldn't fit in underneath the load space at the back. It just wouldn't fit. These wheels and tire combination are too big for the aperture at the bottom. They're not going to fit. So they'd have to go on the roof anyway. Do I want to be carrying one of these full-size spare on the roof? No. So that 20-inch emergency space saver wheel and tire combination is there for just that, to get me from point A to point B. Now I have a tire repair kit. I have a twin ARB compressor. If something should go wrong, I could probably plug one of these and get me off anyway. If it's really bad, where it's come off the rim, I could take this off, put that on and crawl off. I'm not going, hundreds of miles away from civilization. There is really no way you can do that in Europe, let's face it. We don't live in outback Australia. So that is sufficient for me to get me from point A, something happening, to point B to get it fixed. So that's why it's up there now, is it makes it easier to get to. So before the back seats came out, I could pull the fridge, pull out all of the kitchen, which is only just bolted in or screwed in with some self-tappers into the top of the kitchen, pull the whole lot out. I could do it in 10 minutes. Put the front seats forward, push the whole of that load space forward, enough to lift up the load space and get the spare wheel out. Now that was easy because I had the seats in there and the seats could drop forward. The seats aren't in there now. I've got 3 load spaces all bolted together. I could not get these out quickly. I mean, I probably could, but it's also plumbed into the water heater. There's electrics now in there on connectors. So could I do it? Yeah, but it will probably take me double the time to get everything out to get a spare wheel and tire combo out. So that's why it's come out, and that's why it's sitting on the roof. It just makes it easier now that if anything happened, I can clamber up there, grab it, change it, put that one up there, and we're good to go. Now, I've also had many people, 20 or 30 people I'm guessing now, tell me that if I use that space saver on this wheel or this rim or put it onto this hub, I will end up screwing up my diff, burning out wheel bearings. I mean, there was a whole raft of things that one person wrote to me and told me all of the things that I'm doing and I'm being irresponsible. Well, if it was good enough for an L322 to get from point A to point B, and again, they're speed limited. I'm not going to be belting down the road doing 70. You will take your time. Why wouldn't it be good enough for this? It's pretty much the same running gear. It's based on the same concept. I don't think it would be an issue. So, yeah. So a couple other things around the setup, not necessarily the L322. You can probably see over there, I've got my J-cot sitting on a Helinox cot. That is a wonderful tent. It packs up really, really small. I did a sort of review of it when I first got it. I probably spent, I'm guessing now, 30, 40 nights in it. It's really comfortable. When you're sitting on a cot, you're up off the ground. I've got a mattress in there as well, but I pump it up and then I put a sleeping bag. I've got a Zen Bivy quilt that I bought. I can't remember what it was, a Zen Bivy Light. So it's got a sheet in there. It's not a sleeping bag. It's got a sheet and a quilt over the top. It's very comfortable in there and it's not restrictive. The swag that I've got is very claustrophobic. Because that thing is quite high, you get this sort of spacey feel inside it, and the light color in there doesn't make it claustrophobic. There's plenty of vents in there as well. I've never woken up with it being wet inside. There's just plenty of air circulation inside it, and I think because it is so big and quite tall, is that you end up with plenty of ventilation inside of it. I also sleep with, I don't have the sides fully zipped down. I have the midgie mesh zipped on both sides, but there was a night about a week ago, it was pretty warm. It was like 35 during the day, and then it took a while for the temperature to come down at night. I think I spent most of the night with one side completely open. So I was just sleeping for the whole night with the midgie net open to the elements, and it cooled down quite well. And because I'm under a quilt, I never really got cold. But I do like it. I love that tent. And I think that will last forever. Now, one question, and it's not to do with the L322, it's really to do with rooftop tents over the J-Cot. The question generally comes up is, do you regret getting rid of your rooftop tent? And the answer is no, emphatically no. And there's several reasons. Let's go deal with the rooftop tent. Now, they are convenient. They're massively convenient. And when we did the Velta last year, I could have that rooftop tent popped, ready to go, sleeping stuff all in there, pull the tab on the mattress, everything will be ready. 5 minutes maybe. Yeah, they're convenient, but they weigh an awful lot on the top of the vehicle. And for most people, you're not in them 20, 30, 40 nights a year. You're just not. And they are very expensive. Good ones are expensive. I came to the determination that it was just not justifiable to have it up there all the time. Now, the other thing to look at as well is I live in a 2 up, 2 down in West London. We have no storage space, none. And I don't want to be driving this thing around all year long with a rooftop tent on it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I've already mentioned about your fuel economy goes down quite a lot. Why would I be driving around all winter long with a rooftop tent on the top? So number one, I have nowhere to store it. And number two, you need 2 people at least to get the damn thing off. So if you have plenty of storage space and can lift it up in a garage and put it underneath the roof or on the top of the roof on a crane system, great. But I just don't see the need for them. It also frees up huge amounts of space on the top and weight. And so by going to this, which is a cot which is about yay big, and the tent that sits on the cot, which is just the same footprint, I've reduced huge amount of weight, huge amount of storage space, because I don't need to be lugging that stuff around with me. I can fit it quite comfortably into the back of the vehicle. And all round, it's just a better option for me. And I think a lot of people, and I've seen on this trip, I've seen lots of people driving around with these massive rooftop tents on all types of vehicles and sit there and question why. Okay, I've droned on way too much as I normally do. So I hope this has been interest to you. I know lots of you like the L322 content. I know lots of people like me rambling on about things that I've done to it. Any questions, any comments down below, I'll try and answer them again. I hope that I've answered most of the common questions that I've had stacked up. So thanks very much for your time. I hope this has been of interest to you. Comments down below about anything that I mentioned if you want to know more. Please, hopefully that we've done the 18-inch wheel and tyres and the spare tyre to death now. No more. There's plenty of videos of me talking about it. Do we need to go through it again? I hope not. Right, that's it. I'm going to get some lunch. Cheers. Talk to you soon.